So let me take you through an A to Z of my work. Some things I may have learned during the years I'm working as a designer, and a few things that are important to me. Let's start with A, for appreciation. I really appreciate to be here because it's actually the first time since almost 2 years that I have been doing, or that I'm doing a live talk, a real live talk. The last one was in Munich in March 2020, and a week after that festival, the lockdown in Germany started and the schools closed, and yeah, we were all in lockdown. And then in the past year, I was asked by a Berlin theater to design a poster for them to raise money, because all the independent freelance theater workers, like actors, directors, they didn't make any money. In that pandemic, of course, like many others as well, had big problems. But this poster that I designed for them was called, or I called it, Waiting for the Life Scream. And this is something, or this is exactly, what this here feels as well. Like we were all waiting for this live voice and live voices again. B is for borders.
Bad borders make good stories.
Could you put up the sound a little bit? Thank you.
Bad borders make good stories.
All right. I was born in a country with closed borders. So growing up in East Germany meant that we went, me and my parents went on vacation to an island in the Baltic Sea each year. And from there we could watch the ferries go over to Sweden, and we knew we could never be on that boat. And we could never go to the country on the other side.
Behind every border there is sunshine.
And we couldn't directly call to West Germany either. We could, for some reason, call to other countries. And my grandmother brought sometimes travel magazines, and I picked out a phone number from these magazines that probably was a tourist office somewhere, and I called that number. And these numbers were somewhere in the world, in some other country, and I was just listening to this foreign voice as a kid, and then I was hanging up quickly. And for me, this was kind of, the sound of freedom, adventure, and possibilities. And somehow,
a border is needed to see the freedom.
History happened, and the borders opened, and we were free. That country was gone. And I ask myself sometimes, like, if that wouldn't have happened, and if these borders would have stayed closed, like, would I have become a designer or not? I'm really thankful for spending these first 11 years in the GDR, and with these restrictions, because I think it makes me appreciating our world and our different cultures a lot more, and also that it's possible to just come here together and talk with each other. C, for copycat, because with this interconnectedness, there come some downsides. Some designers may know that sometimes some work of yours get ripped off because it's just visible online and everybody can access it. And a cover of Fucht magazine that I did in 2009 showed this rolled up paper, and somehow it worked really well. It showed some drawings underneath in these cutouts, and I got asked all the time by other magazines to repeat that for them, and usually I said no, and then there was one request from Washington Post magazine, and then I said yes, because it's a big magazine, and I repeated that design for them, for their cause, which was the weekend magazine of the Washington Post. And it was about lives of people that had died that year, and remembering their life stories. And then a few years later, that was back in 2012, someone showed me or sent me a link to a magazine that was done, that looked very similar to what I had done for the Washington Post. And I was really angry at first, and I didn't know what I should do, and I thought maybe I should rant on Instagram, and I had a friend that told me, no, don't do it, it's really bad karma. And I realized that he's right and that my anger will pass. And the thing is, it's not doing you any good. Being angry and feeling that wave of revenge, because the real harm actually happens to the person who, just copies some other people's work and who would steal an idea, because that person will never have the satisfaction of initially have gotten that idea and of coming up with it. It's never theirs, and it's nothing to be proud of. And I think that's more damaging than a lot else. D for doubt, because with pride comes doubt, and let's say it's a constant dialogue. I'm really envious of people that never doubt their work. And maybe you can create shitty work, but you would still feel good about it. But doubt is also a good thing as long as it's used to acknowledge and recognize a bad idea. But more often, it is like that monster that's under your bed and that maybe keeps you from doing, and you question all your abilities. And somehow it puts you into a state of not making and of fear of the blank page. And the simple truth is, sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't. And you can only be as good as you are in the very moment you are doing a work. And otherwise there would never be bad or never be great work. But in the meantime, we can all just be superheroes practicing yoga on a carpet. E for effort. One cannot be good in a job if you don't put loads of time, sweat, and effort into it. And they say, make it look effortless, and that means to work even more. And for some of my work, I went through miserable, long processes. And here's one example. For Drawing Festival, we created a poster series of the 3 posters in a stop-motion animation with real pencils that got shaved down. And we worked really hard for days because we destroyed pencil sharpness and we inhaled all the dust, and it went on forever. And then because we were running out of time, a friend of mine passed by and helped out, and then she noticed and asked us, why didn't you just put holes in that board and you just move the pencils up and down? And well, we were so far that we couldn't redo it and start again, so we were kind of destroyed. But a little bit later, another magazine, Wired magazine, wanted also a similar design, and I could only say yes because I had to do it the other way, the easier way. And so the left one we did, I don't know, in a week or 2 weeks, and the right one was done in half a day. F is for Fukt magazine. So this is a magazine for contemporary drawing, and I'm the creative director. And Björn, who's here as well, he has founded the magazine, and it's super old. We are around since a very long time, and we celebrate the medium of drawing in this magazine and all its facets. And these might be artists working with pencil on paper, but it might also be an artist who has a robot drawing, or trees, making trees draw by the wind. When Björn founded the magazine, there was basically nothing else out there in the magazine world for drawing, and or drawing specifically also just had a slow comeback or was growing at all, or becoming an art form that was acknowledged. And this medium basically had became its role, or got its role in the art world, and besides being just sketches for other works. And the magazine aims for being basically providing an exhibition space for drawing that is a bit more intimate than going into a big public space. And Vogt until today has built a big archive of artists that have been shown in the magazine. I think it's more than 450 or 460 until today. And that was the first cover from 1999. I wasn't involved then in the magazine, but that was how it started out. It was a photo on the cover. And so a lot has happened in 20 years, and that was our last, or is our latest issue from last year. An issue on story telling, or story lines, narrative drawing. And this cover for the issue reveals some hidden words in these folds, and because there are many stories and drawings where there's something to find and to reveal. And you can check obviously this issue out at the table that we have at the book fair here. That is maybe easier than to flip through spreads, but we are showing artists that work with stories in sequences that might be comic heroes like Chris Ware, but it's also illustrators like Brian Rea, and we have a lot of more really great artists in this issue. Washi Bai has very poetic non-language using drawings, and go check it out. And drawing has a close relationship to movement. And once we experimented with these little robots, and they were running through ink drops, and they are creating a drawing with that, with their movement. So this implementation of chance is always a really fun way to work. Give up some control, and then we at some point just wanted to take it a bit further, and we got some interns that looked cuter than the little robots. And we wanted them to play with the letters as a warm-up, but as interns sometimes are, they didn't really do what we wanted them to do, and they just ate the letters. And later we had the mice walking through actual ink letters, ink pool letters, and they were drawing their little tails through it, and they created a drawing around the name Vogt of the magazine. And by that, they also did these drawings that we showed in the magazine, and I really love this unintentional beauty of it, of the drawings by the mice. This was our cover, in the back cover, with the mice peeking out. And they weren't harmed. We kept them as pet mice at home. one issue of the magazine was looking at systems artists' work in many set up rules, schedules, and methods to work, and some are just opposing systems, illustrate systems. They create new or utopian ones, and or they are critical towards it. And we thought it was time to make a whole issue out of that, because we just noticed many artists are working with that. And this cover, this cover, as you saw, is made out of discs that break up the word system and is movable, and it's a little bit interactive. And when they're all like foiled and come out from the printer, they all come and they all look a little bit different, because these discs come to settle in different positions. And we would show an artist that would draw little scenes and stories and landscapes into old machine blueprints. Or we had Jim Carrey's cartoons that he was drawing mostly about Trump after since the election of Trump as president. So he was the main target. We showed an artist that trained a robot to draw portraits with an artistic stroke, a very human stroke, basically. We showed as well or featured the Captured project, where inmates of an US prison were drawing portraits of CEOs of mega corporations. And the question above all was like, who is the criminal here? And Pablo Elguera commented on the art system. So these cartoons were part of that issue as well. And then another issue focused on text-based drawings, because that's also a field that we noticed very many are working in. Basically, many people are drawing, or many artists are drawing with words. So the cover also just became fully drawn in words. And we had artists that would cut out from the Bible every single letter and rearrange them into these drawings and mesmerizing patterns. We showed the Voynich manuscript, which is a 600-year-old manuscript that is not deciphered until today. And researchers are working as much as they can, and it's still not figured out what's in the book. Zhu Bing would draw landscapes completely, entirely out of Chinese characters. Polar shares, maps had to be a part in this, and Ed Ruscha's work is legendary, of course. And also we did a feature on Semitic writing where you can't read anything. And it's not a real language used, so it just looks like language, but it's actually just shapes. And yeah, we usually do these teasers for our issues to promote the magazine, and it's also a play and always a way of finding a possibility to work with the whole medium in motion. We also played a little bit around with AR and making that cover coming to life. And we thought it was really funny. We packed it into a little app and wanted to submit it to the App Store. And we didn't think of anything bad when we received that email, we noticed that your app icons, screens, or other metadata items include content that is not appropriate for all age groups. Specifically, your app name and screenshot contains Fukt. So basically, we couldn't go any further with this because of the name of the magazine, and we couldn't do anything because it's written on all the screenshots. But for exactly that reason, a feministic porn magazine from Norway once tried to steal our name, which means humid or moist in Norwegian, fukt. And they were already in the process of registering the name when we heard about it, and we just freaked them out with imaginary lawyers and that we never had, and they stepped back, luckily. But it got us inspired, and we did a sex issue. And sometimes we sell our souls, and it worked. And because all we ever wanted was to get into Playboy's reading corner, and that worked. And many artists are working with this subject, and I didn't know. So we did an issue on dirty drawings, and what's fun is that there's this different layer of abstraction. When you think of drawings, of erotic drawings, and they can have this really humorous aspect to it, and they can be fun, and they can be really weird, or weirder. And it was a quite successful, more successful issue than we thought. I think it's almost sold out. Basically, it is sold out. And for some reason, people sent me their pictures with cats with this issue. And if there is still time and there is no pandemic going on, we would do parties for the magazine. But it has been 2 years since we did one. G for greed. Let's stay with the magazine for a moment, because I want to tell you what I learned about greed. And in the beginning, the magazine was distributed by whatever opportunity flew by. A store we would pass, an art book fair we would be at, or in residency, but it had no structure really. And we started to attend the New York Art Book Fair with the magazine in 2008. And all of a sudden, there was this direct interest in the magazine, and people came to the table and asked, "What's your story?" And it's wonderful. And we felt we needed a better distribution system. And we worked for many years with 2 distributors, and it was a catastrophe. We got the magazine out in the stores. We got more people knowing about it and becoming fans. But there it ended, because the payments were continuously delayed. So much that at some point they owed us 5-figure numbers. And there is a general serious problem with distribution of art publications. Many of art book publication projects are publicly funded by project funding or publication grants that one manages to get. And don't get me wrong, Björn is a Norwegian citizen, and we really benefit from that. I mean, the print costs of the magazine is often supported by these type of grants. So we have to thank Norway for the money and the oil and the policy towards arts and culture. But ironically, there's really a downside to it, because it makes matters worse. Art publication funding became a business model for certain art distributors, because they know artists are so happy to get their book with a distribution and to distributors, and they're so grateful that their books are out into the stores and it's paid for, that they will never ask the distributors for their money back from the sales. So I singled out 6 states of emotions everybody I talked to went through dealing with this type of distributors. The first one would be happiness. And it starts when you manage to get funding for your publication project. The second one is you feel professional. You find a distributor who takes it into their program, and you're so proud. The third one is it's out there and you see it in the bookstores. Amazing, even prouder. But then something doesn't feel quite right. Because for some reason you don't get paid. And then the fifth state would be the one of denial, because you tell yourself, yeah, it's not good, but at least the public or the distributors try, they struggle, and publishing is a really tricky business. The sixth state would be anger, because the distributors claim they're so sorry and that they haven't paid you yet. But if you just gave them copies of your new issue, they would pay you something of the previous depth. And when you heard that 3 or 4 or 5 times, then there's just one thing you can do. So we finally decided to end these relations with them, and we started our own web shop, and it seems like the most obvious thing to do, but it took us 16 issues of the magazine to come to that moment of clarity, because we were afraid of all the work, of all the time and the missing networks with the bookstores that has to go into that. But somehow this fear stayed unwarranted, because it had already worked so badly with the distributors that we did work with one-to-one relationships with the bookstores already. So for some reason, we got this thing to work, and we sold out more of the issues than we ever did before. H is for high rise, because also a small studio can have an animation running on the highest building in Shanghai at that time, a Citibank tower. And I is for ideal versus real, because my ideal workplace would look like that, versus sometimes my real workplace looks like that. J is for jail, because I went to jail once. We made a book cover out of little chains that complemented the letters on the title on the cover, and when they moved, they would destroy the appearance of the name Vogt. We had the chains attached to the cover by inmates of a women prison in Berlin, which I thought was a very conceptual approach. And I wanted to make a whole story out of it, but of course I couldn't bring any camera or phones or anything into the prison. K is for Kiel Week, Kieler Woche. It is an annual sailing festival in Germany, in the city of Kiel. What's specific about this, that it has a corporate design competition since 1948. Going on, that is renewing the design for the event each year. Many designers have went through that competition in Germany, and the collection of posters of this competition and this event became design history. And the most challenging part also about this competition, because the theme always stays the same. It's always sailing, it's ocean, it's water, it's blue, it's white sails, and it's tricky. It's very tricky to get away from the color blue. So it's an exercise in variation. And the current design, which now lasted for 2 years almost because of the pandemic and because we didn't do the competition and partly the event didn't take part, was by a Swiss designer, Jiri Oplatek. Claudia Basel is his studio name, and it also stirred up a big controversy because we as a jury really liked the humorous angle on the motive, the pirates, etc. But many sailors really took that personally, and they felt really affected, and they said, like, pirates are still a danger to sailors, and this is something that it's not funny. And we tried to talk ourselves out of that decision, and we thought it's still funny. And then COVID arrived, and everybody who defended the pirate couldn't really go with his skull anymore. And half a year later, we actually kind of had to row back. And then this design, in this case, luckily proved or provided a system that could adjust a little bit. So it became a knot because people stick together. And then at the end for this year, it became a smiley. So it changed 2 times. And I still like the pirate most, but it also proved that design can react to to situations and circumstances, and we can't be blind to what's around us. And that's what I designed in 2012. It was inspired by blown sails that I had seen in Kiel. And it's, other than in the first years, this is obviously not only a poster competition, this is a whole merchandise and corporate identity that has to work on all the products that you can imagine, and there would be flags and everything in the city. And this car almost didn't get produced because it actually looked like an emergency car. And the one thing that makes this competition very special is that we as the jury, we would invite designers for 2 days to the event, and we hang out on a boat and we talk about design and we show them what's going on in Kiel. And usually all the competitors, the designers that take part in the competition, get to know each other, and that makes one thing happening, that at the end everybody wishes luck to the other one. And it's really interesting that people leave that place and don't have hard feelings, even if they are not the winner finally. And that what makes this whole thing really special. And it's an anonymous competition. We don't, as a jury, we don't know who is entering what. And that's why I'm still taking part. No, I'm not taking part, but I'm still with the competition. L for limit. Over the past 10 years, I often thought about what growth means, and for my design practice, and if I have to have a bigger studio, more people, and if that wouldn't be inevitably the proof that I made it. And growing means one thing first. It's more work, less time, and maybe even less freedom, because constantly having to provide many salaries and high rent puts you into a limbo of organizational tasks, and you may have to take on work that you don't want to take on. So I have the feeling that growth might be the opposite of independence, but it always depends on the scale, and some growth is important, and I think it has to be really manageable on a human scale. Speaking of growth, M is for motherhood. 4 or 5 years into my career, we were considering maybe to have one kid that couldn't do any harm. And then it was twins. And how could be, being a freelance designer, having 2 kids possibly work out? And it doesn't, I think. Most of the time, life looks like this. It made for a funny photo series, but it's not exaggerated. And from time to time, we had to tape them against the wall, or at sometimes later, when they were older, we had gotten wasted altogether. And at 7, such society took over, and they got into school, and then it became really zen. And N is for no. Because saying no is something you don't do as a designer, especially not if you're starting out. One doesn't say no to jobs, or no to too little payment, or no to all the objections from the clients. And after all, no is considered a negative thing, a negative attitude. And I'm still struggling with it, but there are certainly things one has to say no to.
Bad briefings.
Messy organized clients.
Too low pay.
Too short deadlines.
Working on the weekend.
Make that logo bigger.
Move the type to the right.
Move the type to the left.
Move it back to the right.
It's not readable.
Put that image there.
The text is too small.
The text is too big.
Borders.
Self-doubts.
Self-pity.
Burnout.
Fear for the wrong reasons.
Pitches.
Soy milk.
Skipping lunch.
Instagram before breakfast.
No freedom.
Fear of the blank page.
Unplugged time machines.
Anger.
Pushers.
Nothing.
Too much. Marketing idiots.
Dandruff.
Broken hard disks.
Arseholes.
A dear client of mine is an orchestra in Mannheim. They are an orchestra of a theater, and we designed their identity a few years back for all their concerts. will go a bit faster because I'm running a little bit out of time. We looked into musical notes, and basically we stole all the interesting parts of the notes and made them into numbers, because this orchestra always, each year plays, or each season plays 8 concerts. So that was the line for the identity for them. And yeah, there are some letters and some patterns that are used here and there. And then these, always when they play a concert, they will put up the flags. And yes, it's going on now since 5 years or more that we design all their programs and posters for each of the seasons. And each season has another theme behind the number of the concert. And just go with this one a bit faster. This was a whole season that wasn't played, and where no poster was produced and hanged, even though they were designed. And it was, of course, the pandemic season. And now we went into the deconstruction phase, and we'll see what comes next. P is for process and play, because I often get asked, what's your process? And I can't really say I have a fixed formula for. And one strong motivator is definitely having fun in a process. It sounds really superficial, but if we let go more and if we get a bit relaxed, ideas often come, and because you often have to be in a right state of mind. And at best, there is some kind of flow happening where you can hardly stop making. And during the pandemic, I collected absurd news in German newspapers or international newspapers, and I was drawing them with color pencils just because it was so slow. And I did a whole series out of them, and yeah, the mutants are here was literally news in the newspaper, and that was a hilarious one. Recommendation by our politicians: Germans should celebrate Easter like Christmas, because at Easter we had some lockdown. I don't know. And having fun could also mean to do something you shouldn't do, like putting holes in books and copying money, doing things that are not making sense and maybe don't get used at all. Working with flour smells good, while working with sausage smells bad. And sometimes a goal can also mean to do something just very overcomplicated to prove it's possible. That would be just a flyer folded very complicated for an art biennale, or shooting words made of fashion from a rooftop, just doing long walls of color with almost no typography. And I would also find joy going to the toolbox and find everything that I have that has no use anymore. And I think play is overused in design for a good reason, because if you get sucked into a process and you forget your surroundings, then it's becoming like a child again. And for this project, we did that. We built a little city out of all these unused objects that we found, and it was for an architecture competition, the graphics for or the design for that competition. And if the audience enjoys themselves, it's proof that something worked out. All this looks like fun and play, and I can't say that I never thought about quitting, because I'm doing this since quite a while. And I sometimes doubt myself if there's no interesting job or no challenge, or there are annoying clients. But then I think I just have to step back and look what I'm doing and what I have achieved, and that we're really, really lucky to be in a job where we can decide that we want to stay at least partly like a kid, or as a kid in that state of play. So I think for all of these things there are some solutions. For the bad client, don't work with them anymore. No interesting jobs, time to play and come up with something yourself. Too much stress is a tricky one. I haven't found the solution because if a job is interesting, I take it. Everyone is so much better and so much more creative. Then we just have to put the fucking phone away. All this sounds very easy, but I think we are just lucky in this profession and a bit spoiled because it's actually a really good thing that we are doing. Reuse. Copying yourself is dangerous, but it can be really good to be reusing ideas that maybe haven't come to a final execution before. And I had pitched for design competition for a job, and I wasn't selected. And a few weeks later, got a call from another client, and I proposed it to them, and it became almost the same thing, but the other one stayed in the drawer, and this became the real thing. So I think this is something that is very, very satisfying because the work wasn't lost and it wasn't hidden in the hard disk and eventually just gone. I think it's just a really good thing if something can be used elsewhere. As for Slovenia, because this is not the first time for me here, I first learned about Slovenia through a cookbook I designed for Anna Roche for Fiden Publishers. So I got to see all these beautiful pictures of the beautiful landscape, and that was my entry to Slovenia. Because there were more photos like that in the book, maybe than recipes. No, that's not true. But they were really stunning. And the water, also the photos of the water that I saw, and the Socha River were a bit inspiring for the watercolor ink openers and cover for this book. And we later also went there to eat, and we visited the area around, and so that was my first contact with Slovenia. Now I'm thirsty. Always happens at tea. U for Utopia. I know I'm a bit late, but I had been visiting Skopje many years ago and designed this poster for an art exhibition there and for a project of Björn. And I learned at that moment, or back then, I learned a bit more about Skopje. And in 1963, when that devastating earthquake destroyed much of the city of Skopje, international help for rebuilding were set up, as well as an architecture competition initiated by Poland for a new building of a museum of contemporary art. And one of the participating architects was Oskar Hansen, who didn't win, but he had submitted the most creative proposal for a new museum, a building that had flexible and movable structures. It could react to the art that was shown. And these type of honeycomb hexagon shapes were cut into triangles and could be elevated and move up and down. And I learned about that through a collaboration with two artists from Skopje, Janusz Szalowski and Christina Ivanowska, for their project Oskar Hansen's MoMA, when we collaborated. They asked what if that museum would have been built and which art would have been shown. And I designed an identity for a fictive museum with a logo and exhibition posters, for a museum that never existed. And part of that book about the project was these pages were part of the book. If you don't know about something, it doesn't mean it does not exist. These pages were distributed throughout the book. And the real museum, however, that was finally built by two Polish architects, is still there, a modernistic building. The collection of that museum was put together entirely by solitary acts of international artisan galleries, and they donated artworks, and a collection was built. And it opened in 1970, and last year was the 50th birthday. And I was asked to design a new logo for that museum. And what struck me is that anachronism in the city. In 2014, through a big building project, classicist monuments were erected, remembering a history that didn't even happen, and pillars built on top of communist architecture and styrofoam. Much seems fictive, and time seems to work differently there. And that became that new logo. So there's still a little bit of earthquake and a little bit of shaking in the logo. And this M can provide space and is movable, and a little hint towards Hansen maybe, who didn't even build the museum. But I think that really fits Skopje as well, to reference things that don't really have anything to do with the actual museum. And yeah, one can write stuff between the M and the existing architecture in the museum are showing elements that are in that M, in this broken M, and there are diagonals and they're broken, and the stairs are also looking a little bit like that. And it started all out with celebrating these 50 years and is becoming then the permanent logo. And there will be a typeface in use too that is a little bit dysfunctional because it's really hard to read. And it can be taken apart and be used for kids stuff and graphics for children. And yeah, that's about that museum, which is still very much in progress. V for value, because I think above all these design questions, the real value in life is love and friendship. And a friend of ours was in hospital, and his girlfriend had asked many friends to send a cheering up video, and he received a lot of them, and I think it really helped, and it did cheer him up. Why? I have to ask myself, am I doing this? When I was a kid, I really enjoyed hanging out in my father's workshop. And he was an industrial designer, and he would build little models and watches and interiors for museum and lamps in his workshop. And he let me shoot with his air gun into the wall, and I could also draw on the walls. And maybe that is where it all began, the importance and the natural act of drawing, and that everything was allowed around the house. And that this fundamental artistic expression was nurtured, and there were almost no restrictions. And I think that had a big influence on me. X for extra, because I think sometimes it just needs a little bit of an extra to make people happy. Why is for yes, because I want to give you
Fun.
the yeses.
Smart clients.
Good pay.
That weird feeling.
Insecurity. Unknown territories.
Fuck that comfort zone. Doubts and pride.
Precise briefings.
New challenges.
Happy clients.
Hard work.
Dreams.
Sailing trips.
Soup for lunch.
Freedom.
Starting over.
Jury work.
Curiosity.
Good pencils.
Killing your darlings.
Helping friends. Yes.
New friends. Fear for the right reasons.
Color.
Traveling.
Structured folders.
Taking the train.
Backups.
Making sense.
Failure.
Matcha flavored ice cream.
And Z is for absolutely zero time left. By all means. Thank you.
You tell, so who is also in your studio? How is it organized?
I have one person that is like most of the time with me in the studio, and during all the years we were sometimes 3, sometimes 4 people. But people are coming and going, how it is, how it often is. And then we have the project of Fukt. This is another team, so this is not the design studio team. It's the magazine team, which is also 2, 3 people. So that's the wheeze. And sometimes, of course, I may have done one work just alone, and I say we anyway.
So, like generally, like do you make it more as a small teams for each project, or do you have like a kind of standardized team and then you pull in other people?
Well, I don't have such a big studio that I decide, okay, this is the small team for this project or this, like it's basically, it would also, the pandemic definitely fucked this over a little bit because all of a sudden it was lockdown and in the beginning jobs were not there or stopped. And so it's actually still in a little bit of a rebuilding phase right now, even though work never stopped. But usually we would be maybe 3 people in the studio, and then when a job comes in, then it's usually either all or at least 2 people start thinking about the project, and then it would maybe go to one person who does the contact with the client as well. Or, yeah, that's basically the way it would work in ideal times.
Anybody else, maybe, with a question? Well, I would. Sarah.
Did you know you wanted to do graphic design? How did you get started?
I mean, I certainly have a family background of my father as a designer, if not a graphic designer, then still design was there. And my uncle is an artist, and my mother was in art history. So it's like I had the background, and I certainly never wanted to sit in front of the computer all day long. That's what I've told my father once. When I was a teenager or something, and I tried to do something else. At least I tried to go into film, and I did internships in TV production firms, and then I found myself designing the business cards for the moderators, and I thought, okay, I have to give up. It's probably that direction. That's more me than the camera work, or yeah.
Okay, sorry. It was a high hand.
It was a high.
Yes. So thank you very much. And
Thank you for
let me
having
just remind everybody. So the Fukt magazines are also available on the behind the corner, just around the corner. So yeah, please go there, check them, buy them, and so on. And I thank you very much.